Welcome to the Portal Connector 5.0 release webinar. My name is Steve Webb. I'm the VP of Product Development for the Portal Connector. Throughout the webinar, we do have people standing by to answer some questions. If we don't get to your questions, of course, we will have some Q&A towards the end as well. So feel free to type in your questions there and ask along the way. What we're going to do is we have a couple big features with 5.0. Let me just jump into my screen here. The first feature that we're going to start with is the migration module. So one of the challenges that we've seen with not just Portal Connector development, but Sitefinity in general, is the migration from dev environments to UAT environments to QA environments and so on, all the way up to production environments. We feel strongly here at the Portal Connector that there should be a tool, a migration tool, to push from environment to environment without having to pay for that extra add-on. I know in Sitefinity you do have the SiteSync functionality, but it requires a professional license of Sitefinity, as well as the add-on for SiteSync, which pushes the cost, the total cost of ownership for Sitefinity well up over $20,000. So we developed the migration module. It's also a replacement for, it's not actually a replacement, the accelerator builder and accelerator importer. When we first rolled out these particular functional elements, our intent was not necessarily for migrating between environment to environment, but more along the lines of being able to create a solution that you can roll out to multiple, one-time rollout to multiple Portal Connector portals. And of course, throughout the usage of it, a lot of partners and customers tended to try to use that as a migration utility, and it really wasn't designed for that. So with 5.0, we have a new migration module. So I'm just going to open that up there. Now this is designed to essentially be simple. So you can see here that we have connections down the side, and then we have a migrate. If I go into the connection side of things, we have a unique key for this particular site, but we also have the capability of setting up multiple configurations. And right now you can see I have a production one set up right now, and you can also export it offline and import it later if you wanted to. So to actually create one of those connections, you just simply enter in the information where the target name is. So that's just a name, a target URL, so which site you want to actually migrate to. The target site key, which is similar to this site key. And then of course, username and password for the service user that's going to actually migrate that. So if I go over to my other instance here, we have TPC migrate. If I go back in here, you'll see that the migrations on this side has that unique site key as well, and that's what you're going to need to identify it, and it's more of a security type thing. As well as when you're setting up the destination for the migration, you want to make sure that you create an admin user. So I already have one created here, a SiteSync user, it's administrator, or a sync user, sorry, that is not logged in, because this is just for synchronizing customizations. If the user is logged in, then you start running into concurrency issues with that administrative user being logged in. So just taking a quick browse through this particular site, this TPC migrate site. If I hop into my pages, it's a completely blank site, so there's no pages, there's no forms, no templates. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually push over, except for the default templates, of course, but there's no customized templates. So what we're going to do is we're going to push over all of the configurations from this TPC5 site over to this migration site. And before I do that, I'm just going to take a quick spin through that so you can see what type of customizations we're moving over. So here we are, TPC5. You can see here that we have a custom template. We have some knowledge base stuff here clicking into those knowledge base articles, of course, it has all the details. This is just data from Dynamics CRM, of course. So it's not going to be synchronizing any data from CRM. It's going to connect to whatever CRM system that you have set up on the other side for your production environment. Logging in really quick here. Of course, now you can see that we have all of our support, our profile stuff. Most people are familiar with this particular site because we use it for our demo sites. So going into that dashboard, of course, you have those grids and those charts. So there it is there. All the profile stuff we're going to push over as well. And then we'll see what happens. And of course, on the migrate site, we have nothing, of course, because it's just a blank site. So jumping back into our administrative area. So now we talked a little bit about that user. So we have that migration user. We have that site key. Now really what we want to do is just go into the migrate side of things. So our goal here at the Portal Connector, of course, is to keep things very simple. You can see here that, because we have that connection selected, production, it's actually going to tell you where you're going to. So we're going to migrate from TPC5 over to TPC migrate. And then down here, we just want to run a quick test here. Yeah, okay, so it's connecting successfully with that user. So we're all good there. And then we're just going to select what we want to migrate over. So I want to migrate over the whole site. And keep in mind that this is the first version of it. We did identify some usability features that we would like to add, like a select all button. But for the time being, if you hold control and you hit that, click that checkbox, it'll select all of the nodes underneath there. So I'm going to select all of those pages, all of my login pages, and then let's just hit all of these here as well. So now I'm selecting all of the pages. So there they are. And what it's designed to do is, you notice here that we're only selecting pages because it's designed to actually go out, fork out from those pages and grab every resource that it requires for that specific page to be migrated. So now when you're doing those customizations, and say you have multiple developers working on your portal, and you have one developer working on maybe the profile section, another developer working on the support side of things, and the support person finishes up their section, then you can just select that one support section and all the nodes under it, and you can just migrate that one section over. If by chance this support section requires a login page, it will automatically go out and grab that login page, and then of course continue forking out to grab all of this content. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second after I complete this migration. So I can give it a name. Let's go migrate to production. Now you can see here I want to export the widget templates as well as the resource packages. So of course the resource packages, if you're doing MVC templates, you have a resource package folder. So it'll grab that folder as well and migrate all of that content over as well. If you have pages that have specific permissions assigned to users or roles, you can choose to export those users and roles as well, and it'll migrate those users and roles that have permissions for these pages. And of course, you can export those permissions. If by chance you don't export the permissions, it will import these pages. Anything that has permissions assigned to it, it'll import it as admin only. So that way, it's not being migrated over and all of a sudden it's live to general public, where it could be a authenticated type portal. Now, if I say don't migrate users and roles, and say for instance in your dev environment, you created a new role for order history, so they need the order history role to access this, and you don't migrate it over, it will set that to administrator only as the default. So we're going to take everything, of course. We have 28 pages selected, and we're just going to click on that migrate to production and confirm that. So over on our jobs, it's going to actually start up there in a second. There it is. I'm just going to add a couple filters here so we can see all of the completed ones as well as we don't need those canceled ones. And we'll just wait for it. Right now it's exporting. It usually doesn't take very long, but it really depends on how much you're actually exporting and importing. But this would take maybe about 1 minute. So as I said, while this is actually exporting, when you select those pages, and say for instance you select maybe just a single page, the login page, it's actually going to go out and take a look at that template as well and grab that template. If you have pages related to anything on that template, so for instance, if you have a login control on that template and you have, a forgot password page or something like that, it's going to grab those pages as well. Otherwise, you'll end up with dead links when it gets migrated over. So it'll also grab all your resources. So it's going to grab any forms that you might have created and are on those pages. It's going to grab any images that are on those pages. There we go, it's completed. So before I move over, I'm just going to just finish my sentence here. Any images. One important factor though is that this version of it, it's if you have just a regular content block, and inside that content block you're linking to an image, it will not grab that image. We are, again, like I said, for 5.1, enhancing this. It's going to actually start spidering through all of those content blocks as well and grabbing all of those images from the content blocks and migrating that as well. As well as a few other, like I said, more usability type features for this, including being able to schedule those migrations, because right now, of course, it's a manual migration side of things. There is an API for the migration module, so you could write custom code against it. So if you have any of those continuous deployment type mechanisms, you could create custom code to kick off those migrate functions. So now that it's completed, I'm going to flip over to my site here, and we'll just jump into, so this is the migrate site. Jump into the pages. You'll see it took all of those pages, the same structure, same format. Every page that we had in there is defined and it is listed there. All of our content, so forms, I think we have about 30 forms or so, 20 forms. All the forms, as well as all the templates as well. So if I go into templates, you'll see that it has all of those custom templates to the self-service, inner, home, so on and so on. So what does that look like? Just let this refresh. And there's your portal. So you'll see here that we have, again, all the knowledge base articles. For simplicity purposes, I just have this already pre-connected to the CRM instance. So it has all of that data. But what I will do is go and actually create a user for this portal, and we can just see the forms and the dashboards and so on that we have created here. So just jumping into my portal, you can see there it is there, TPC Migrate. I'm just going to add a contact to this really quick. Take my Gen user. Manage my portal roles for her. And you see here we have a bunch of portals listed there, but the one I'm really interested in is TPC Migrate. Create my new user. And let's assign her the user role. There we go. Let's close that. And let's take a look after we log in with Jen here. So there we go. We have logged in as Jen. Go into my dashboard, and we can see all those customizations that were migrated over. So again, unlike the accelerator builders, this is designed to be used multiple times. So you can migrate these pages over and over and over again, and it's going to take all those customizations or those new changes over to whichever site you're migrating to. All right. So So moving along, the next element I'd like to talk about is one that I personally am pretty excited about. We call this feature form flow. So traditionally with the portal connector, if you wanted to create any type of multi-page type experience, in previous versions, if you're using web forms widgets, you can use the next and previous button. But in MVC, you'd use the TPC submit button, which you can configure to be a previous button or a next button and pass in parameters, so on and so on. But it wasn't really as slick as it probably needed to be. So what we did was we came up with this concept, something called form flow. So actually, so let me just jump into my content here for a second, and my forms. You'll see here that I have a few forms already created. Just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to create a new page and we'll call this form flow. And that's fine. Let's show the navigation and let's go with index or template. So the form flow widget, it's designed to, again, provide that wizard type functionality, but there's a lot of other functional elements to this widget, which makes it a very powerful widget. So there it is there, form flow. I'm going to drag that on, just drop it in place. I'm going to define my flow. So inside of here, we have a workflow designer. So there it is there. And of course, it starts off with a form because your entry points to any type of application or any type of process. It will typically be a form where you ask for information. So clicking on that, you can see here down the side, we have it's going to be a form. I'm going to actually call this, rename it to my contact form. Okay. And I'm going to select one of my contact forms. So there it is, form flow 1 contact. So right away, now you can see, hey, you know what? We can start configuring this particular form fields to add to the query string. So if I want to pass in any of those fields that are on that form into the query string for the next step, I can. So I can just pass through this last name or the street or you know, the country or the zip. It's already going to pass the ID, so you don't have to worry about passing the ID. It's actually passing it by these checkboxes here. So you can see here, pass created record IDs to the next page, pass first created record only, or pass all existing parameters. And of course, I can also go right into editing that form. So if I want to make a change to that form, I can click the edit button and it'll open up a new window to edit this form. So for this, it's my first step. So I don't want to pass anything over to the next one. I'm already passing the ID, which is great. So I'm just going to click on save. And now you can see here that we have, of course, the option to add another form, a page, or a rule. So the next step I want to do is just drag one of these rules on, just drop it in. And now to configure this rule, I can say, hey, the contact that just entered all that information in the marital status field, did they say that they were, is it equals to married, widowed, divorced? What I want to do is I want to identify whether they have a spouse. So I'm just going to select married. So if it's equal to married, I'm going to click on save. And then I can drag another form on there saying for the true side, yes. Then I can ask for the spouse information. Spouse. And of course, it asks me the same questions, pass IDs over, maybe add some query string type information over, so on and so on. I can also show a previous button. So if I wanted to go back a step, I can go back a step as well. So if I want to show that previous, I can add that on there and click on save. Now, say for instance, if this contact isn't married, if I drag another one onto that rule, it's going to actually generate a false node. And I can say, okay, well, in that case, skip straight to account. And of course, I can continue building out. This flow as far as I want. Of course, you can move the flow around. You can resize it. So if you wanted to try to squeeze it on there a little bit better, you can. And then just before I get into this next part, one of the limitations to form flow, and it's important that you know the limitation to this. It is our first version of form flow. We are adding more functional elements to this, and I'll talk about those functional elements in a couple minutes. But one of the limitations is, for instance, after I accept that spouse information, maybe I want to get that account information next. So ideally, what would be nice is if I can just drag this out like this, and then take this spouse and just connect it to my account. So it goes to that node next. So there is a limitation in that right now that you can't loop back to a previous node. That is something that we will be adding in 5.1, the ability to actually loop back to maybe the beginning. So for registrations, enter in one full registration and loop back to the beginning, insert another registration, continue, and so on and so on. So for now, it's very linear and tree-like. So if I wanted to add a new node now for accounts, I'd actually have to take that form and drop it in there and add the accounts again. So there it is. Click on save. So we have those two accounts now. We have a little bit of a branching, branching decision here. And of course, you can have as many of these decisions as you want. So if you want to, you can have a rule after rule after rule. So if it says marital status, for instance, is equal to married. Next one, you want to say, do they have any kids? Then go to this branch or go to that branch. So you don't necessarily need to have a form after a rule. You can have multiple rules and eventually branch out to whatever you need to present for the next step. And then finally, what we have is the termination page. So this is the page that they will be sent to when they've completed all the forms and they click on submit. Usually it's a confirmation page or a thank you page or something like that. For our particular purposes, we'll just drive this one into maybe the home page. Just click on save. And then of course, the page for this terminating block. If you try to save this without these terminating pages, or if you have some type of a logic flaw here, for instance, if you have a rule and you only have one node, when you go to save this, it'll actually prompt you and saying, hey, you need to finish this flow off, okay? So for this one, maybe I'll just click on maybe knowledge articles. That's fine for now. Okay, so there's a basic flow. Now, before I save this and continue on demonstrating this, some of the features that we're adding for 5.1 to the form flow, because we see this as a key feature moving forward for any type of application, is that we're going to add the ability to add on-demand workflows, on-demand CRM workflows into the flow. So it could hit this rule, then fire a workflow, and then go into a form if you wanted to, as well as some CRM custom actions in here as well. So we're going to have a couple more items in here for 5.1, and in the future we're going to continue on with more functional elements and more features for form flow to allow you to create those complex applications a little bit easier in the future. So I'm going to save this. Actually, just before I save this, we do have some other functional elements here, so you can export that as an image or maybe a PDF document. So if you want to share that with coworkers, it will jump out that PDF document for you, so you can walk through it with coworkers, of course. And this here, you can restructure it anyway. So if you want it to be more top down, you could do that as well as, like I said, an image. So now I'm just going to save and close this. Save this. When you go into this flow, it actually, I clicked save a little too quick there. It actually defines that flow for you, so you can read it in pseudocode, submit, if the marital status is equal to whatever, so on and so on. So click on save, it loads up that first form. And there we go. And of course, I could have changed the submit button to next if I want to change the label of that. It's just a step that I happened to miss in this particular demo. Click on publish, And let's open up that page to see what this looks like. Let's go with what we got here. And we will go here. Let's log out. So it's designed to actually be an anonymous form. So I just logged out there, and we'll just type in the form flow. So there's our first form, and of course, if I start entering information, so let's go with Mr. Ryan 7262966. That's his personal number. So if anyone has any problems with their portal, they can call that number. Buxton. And Ryan is currently, let's call him married for this purpose. Excuse me. And I'm not going to actually fill in this whole thing. I only filled in the required fields and this field, of course, because we need that for the branching. So clicking on, and that's actually a key point. If you are planning on branching this, you might want to make that required. Otherwise, it's always just by default going to flow through the true or the false side. So click on submit. It's going to take us to our next step. He's married, so this is asking for spouse information. And I probably should have had titles on these forms so you can see it. Let's just go with June, and we'll give it 17057262966. June Buxton, and email address jbuxton@hotmail.com. So click on submit, and of course I didn't style the buttons as well, so you can switch those around. So the back buttons here and submit buttons here. I think right now I actually have this floating to the left, and that's why it's doing that. So clicking on next, we run into a nice trial message. There it is. We're into the business information now, and we can call this portal connector. And we can complete that. Clicking on submit now, it's going to take us actually through to the home page, because that's where we told it to go to. So that's how that branch works. Let me go back and actually take a different branch. And of course, you can, like I said, you can have as many of these branching flows as you like. So let's go with Sarah. Well, that's a pretty busy household there. They all have the same number. Let's go with and Sarah happens to be single. So there we go. So click on submit. Now, because she's single, it's not married, it's going to take us right into that account information. And we can go, she's at Pavliks.com. And of course, I think we have this one going to the knowledge base articles. So I want to submit this. There we go, knowledge base articles. And that's how that form flow functionality works. So as I said, first version of form flow, completely functional. It's great for those very linear flows. 5.1 will give you the ability to have those looping flows. So if you want to have multiple registrations, you can do that. It will also give you the ability to use workflows as well as custom actions from your CRM 365 environment. So another key feature that we've added to 5.0 is the language mapping. So inside of Dynamics CRM, you're kind of restricted to what type of languages you can present from Dynamics CRM. Their language packs are pretty limiting if you have specific cultural information. For instance, we're in Canada, and in Canada we have English and French national languages, and those language codes are typically CA-EN or EN-CA, and FR-CA, which is Canadian English and Canadian French. But in Dynamics CRM, you can get English and you can get French, but it's FR, which is French, France. That's tough to say. But the problem is that a lot of times when you're actually configuring a portal, because of the way the portals work and it handles the cultural information automatically, what happens is that in France, they use euros, for instance, and maybe they have a different date format. Where in Canada, we're Canadian dollars, and we use a dollar symbol, not the euro symbol, and we format our dates differently from the United States. So we want those cultural elements to be accurate for each of those cultures. Problem is that, for instance, in Canada's example, CRM doesn't have a CA-FR. So a lot of people end up using FR for their French inside of Dynamics CRM. So what we've done is the ability to actually map it to a different culture inside of your portal. So if I go into my advanced settings here, and I scroll down to my portal connector settings, you'll see in the portal connector node, language mappings. So what this allows us to do is say, hey, you know what? For this Sitefinity code is equal to this Dynamics CRM code. So now this Dynamics CRM code, if it is a French France code, we can say we want this to be represented in our portal as Canadian French instead of French France, which now sets all of our cultural information for this portal to be accurate. Inside of Dynamics CRM, it's going to take your whatever currency setting that you have set up, regardless of whether you're viewing your CRM system as French France or EN-US. It's going to take whatever you configured that Dynamics CRM system to set up. But now, if I'm a portal user and I have, if I roll out portal and I have portal users all over the world, they expect to see things in their particular cultural settings. So it allows you to map those cultures back to any of those other cultures that we support, because of course the portal connector supports all language cultures, specific cultures, not just generalized languages. But we also support a lot of languages that Dynamics CRM doesn't support, like actually that's more on the portal side. But any type of the Arabic, for instance, any type of right to left language is something that typically users have trouble with within a Dynamics CRM portal. So as we move through this, the last thing I want to do is just bring up the release notes for 5.0. So you can see here that we've already talked about TPC form flow, and we'll scroll down really slow so we don't let too much out. We talked about the migration utility, which is a great utility for finally moving those features over. And then finally, we talked about the language mapping. But I also like to mention that we're also ready for the Common Data Service 2.0. So if you're deep into the Microsoft world, the Common Data Service is a really key fundamental element to Microsoft's strategy going forward. And essentially all it is really is the Dynamics 365 backend. But now you can build Power Apps and integrate with Flow and Power BI and Business Central eventually is going to be 100% CDS 2.0 as well. So now, because everything's going to be on CDS 2.0 and it's essentially a Dynamics CRM backend, the portal connector will work with any of those custom applications that you create, either using Power Apps or Flow or anything along those lines. Or if you're just using CDS as your data backend for a custom web app or desktop app, it will support any of those, and you can build portals on that platform as well. So it's a pretty key element there. because you can spin up a CDS environment, which is absolutely with absolutely no CRM environment connected to it, just CDS, and the portal connector will be able to connect to that successfully and create customizations based on those entities you create in that environment. So moving along, I know that we talked about some of the major stuff here, but there is a ton of minor feature enhancements, and I'm not going to touch upon all of them. I'm just going to hit a couple of the key ones. So we did enhance our JavaScript API for the static value as well as the validator, which is great. We reevaluated our accessibility for all of our widgets, and once again confirmed that they're WCAG. We have a little typo there. Level 2A compliant, which is great for those accessibility needs. So the ability to format any type of lookup data. So if you wanted to, format your lookup data with maybe a clickable link as an email address or something like that, you can now do those string formats. So being able to move the edit and delete buttons on the grid now, so it's a little bit more flexible. You can move it from side to side wherever you like. Customize that display template, so if you want to show fields in that lookup display, because you can show multiple fields, now you can customize that to show multiple fields. Of course, some performance improvements. We're always focusing on improving the performance of the portal connector. There's one important one down here. There's this one here, the ability to have a subgrid and navigate to a different page. So instead of having a pop-up, you can now go to a different page. Role-based buttons for list type widgets. So for the grid and the list view, whatever, now you can actually assign permissions to those buttons. So if by chance you have an administrator, not someone on your team, but one of your customers is a company administrator, and then you have company contacts, maybe you want those contacts to be able to see information, case information, but not be able to add new cases or edit cases. So now the administrator can have access to adding and editing cases on that grid, and the user you can define as not being able to add or edit cases for that specific thing. So those role-based buttons are pretty cool. Yeah, and just some other issues. So now, of course, bug fixes. We're always looking at the product and trying to make it better. So if we do identify any type of small issue, we usually try to fix these as soon as possible for our customers and partners. But we do keep a running list of all those issues that are fixed for each of those versions. In this particular one, we do have one breaking change. And it's not really a breaking change, but it has to do with GUID encryption. Again, we're trying to make the product more secure, so we want to make sure those GUIDs are encrypted for every template, every GUID that is displayed within the portal connector. So I'm not going to go through the details of this, but it's just essentially having to open up some of those different editors and just clicking save again. I think all the details here will tell you exactly what to do. So that is the only break and change. In this version, we did deprecate the old knowledge base articles. So we had an old knowledge base synchronization type functional element. We deprecated that. It's still there if you need it, but it is gone. And it's been replaced with, of course, the new knowledge base structure, which works with the old structure of articles inside Dynamic CRM, as well as the new structure for Dynamic CRM. Okay, so that's the 5.0 version. It's exciting. It's on our site. It can be downloaded. It can be installed. It's ready to go, and everything you've seen today is, of course, the 5.0 version on Sitefinity 11, which actually came out not that long ago, about a month ago. So there it is, and it's up and running and functional. We hope to see you for the 5.1 release of the portal connector. And of course, feel free to reach out to our team at any time if you do have any other questions regarding the webinar or the 5.0 release or anything in general about the portal connector. Thanks, folks.